Greetings, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the Starseed Ministry. It is Monday. It's June 5th. 2023. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here, especially if you're here on the live chat and part of the live stream. It's really great to have you here. And of course, if you're catching this on the replay, it's also great to have you here in a different time and space. I'm just happy that we're all able to converge in some way. So I hope everyone had a good weekend, taking care of themselves the best way that they can. Wow, how was that full moon for everyone? Now remember, we're still in the full moon phase, right? It was exact as of midnight Eastern Standard Time on the 3rd of June, but we are still in that phase, that phase out of the 8 phases of the lunar cycle. We're still there, and so the revelation of the full moon is still very present. The moon itself is still very full in terms of reflecting the light of the sun, and we are on the other side now of the lunar cycle that started with a new moon intention about the contrast that needs to be reconciled, or at the very least, the contrast that needs to be acknowledged in order to have a mature perspective. So now that we've gotten to the full moon in Sagittarius, which is all about the alchemy and the transmutation of these contrasting viewpoints, true reconciliation in a lot of ways. Now we're on the other side of it. What are we going to do with this illumination? How is it going to unfold in the rest of these 2 weeks, especially leading up to our next new moon, which is also going to be just days prior to the June solstice. So I found this image. I found this image on astronomy astronomy photo of the day. I can't remember which word exactly it is. I look at it all the time. You'd think I would remember. Those are the type of details as a Sag stellium with a sun in Sagittarius without a single piece of Gemini in my natal chart. Which, by the way, in my draconic chart, if you're not familiar with a draconic chart, it actually maps the unconscious drives, the oversoul, as it were, and it is all it is a stellium of Gemini. It is Gemini on steroids. So that really helped me make sense of myself in a lot of ways, to have the natal and draconic chart. Anyway, the point is, as a Sag person, it's all big picture, horizon, and not looking at details at all. So that's kind of this, is it picture? Is it photo? I don't remember. It's just a function of how everything, including my brain, right? I also have Mercury in Sagittarius, which is not happy in Sagittarius. It is at its detriment in Sagittarius. But I digress. The point is that I found this image on Astronomy Picture of the Day, not today, but yesterday, and it is called, this image is called Beyond Earth. And if you can really look at it here, you can see that this individual here has poked their head outside of the firmament here, beyond Earth, to look at the more vast workings of the universe outside of the firmament, as it were. So I thought that was really interesting that it came up on Astronomy Picture of the Day. Now they put it out as, look at this coloring page that you can print out in color. But I was like, wow, that's really interesting for Astronomy Picture of the Day to put something out like this that says Beyond Earth, which really lends itself to this idea that the sun and the moon are moving, both, the Tycho Brahe model of the solar system, moving around the Earth, and then poking its head out. It's got a Truman vibe or a Truman Show type of vibe going on here. And this feels so relevant, so resonant in some ways with this full moon, because it feels like in some ways that we kind of, either by choice or almost by pressure, kind of forced our head out through the firmament to get a sense of like, oh, that's what's out there. And in many ways, this is an oppositional perspective to kind of poke your head out past the veil and to see into the larger, vaster, deeper workings of the universe. And how do we reconcile that now that may have happened? Well, that's what the full moon period and the dissemination emanating moon period really is all about. As the light of the moon starts to wane over the course of the next 2 weeks, the organic, impulsive energy of the new moon that didn't really require too much of us in terms of conscious awareness to participate. Now that we have full revelation, now that the moon is the agent of our internal landscape, our emotions, our feelings, our intuition, now that it has received and reflected the full solar energy in a way that we can actually personally and in our living soul, connect and integrate. Now that that's happened, the light will start to wane, and we have to take responsibility now as conscious beings and objectively taking this revelation, this culmination, this illumination, poking our head out through the firmament, so to speak, right? Seeing past the veil, and now we have to reconcile it in some ways. And this is a complete Sagittarius type of thing, because this is what true alchemy is really about. I did see that the Manly Hall Society posted very recently a talk about esoteric alchemy. So I'm going to check that out and see what he has to say, because it's about really the adjustment of attitude. And I think this has a lot to do with what's going on right now. So we just passed the full moon, so there is still lots of reconciliation. And of course, the sun in Gemini is at the very least giving us access to and having us really be sustained by the dialectic in general. Right? And so some of us may have intentionally kind of forced our vision past the veil. Some of us might have had it forced upon us in some ways based on other actions. But regardless, here we are now. So what do we do to reconcile, to practice not just the technique of the Hegelian dialectic, which is one thing entirely, but how true alchemy is different than the Hegelian dialectic. And I think that's something really important to remember, that it's not just about problem, reaction, solution with the data points that are available, but it's true alchemy, true transmutation. You take the threads of knowledge that you are accumulating through Gemini, for instance, which is also the third house, right? What's right in front of you, situational awareness, the living life experience that you are engaging with in your immediate environment, and you are weaving those threads together into a tapestry, into a mosaic. And that ninth house, representing understanding, wisdom, the higher mind, is more than just the threads of knowledge woven together. There's meaning and abstraction that comes into that vision and in that image, right? And what does that actually mean to us? Well, this is where purpose really comes in. This is where sincere purpose and meaning come into Sagittarius in the ninth house. Now, Jupiter is rules Sagittarius. Jupiter is in the early stages of Taurus still. It's still within a degree of the North Node here. So there is a sense of luck and good fortune and abundance and a sense of social wealth that is wrapped up in, and meaning as well, right? Big meaning and wisdom wrapped up in the soul's trajectory right now at a current and societal level. We're all being drawn to this place. But it's very much, it's one thing, again, to pop your head out through the firmament and be like, whoa, that's the big picture. It's another thing entirely to reconcile that, to actually turn something into something else. And it's the journey. It's the journey along the path to the pot of gold that really matters. And I think as long as we can keep that in mind, have that be the larger, vast perspective that Jupiter rules, we're going to be okay. But it's not going to be all, you're not going to just automatically get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You have to go along the rainbow. You have to take the journey. And it's not enough just to poke your head out, although that is enough to stimulate the process, right? The friction of the fire being started, this is the friction itself is what starts the fire. You can't start a fire without a spark, right? Which is Aries, by the way. And we get that combustion with Mars and Venus now in Leo. we got this grand cross we're going to look at. So we'll get into the reading, we'll get into the astrology, but I really wanted to show this to you. I'm also going to bring up an image here that I think we all need to keep in mind here when we talk about Antares, which is where this full moon was conjunct very, very tightly. Antares, one of the royal fixed stars connected to who? Archangel Uriel, the fire of God, right? So I wanted to bring this up because this was, for those of you who are Sagittarius people, or you're part of the Starseed Fellowship and you got your weekly astrology report, you know that all of this imagery was very tightly wrapped up as part of the mosaic of this full moon. So this card in particular from the Akashic Tarot is about using that fire and that motivation in a lot of ways, that transformative action and creativity to dig beyond the really inert and very rock-like substance of our own history, right? It's not enough, again, to just poke through the veil. We actually have to take that energy and really dig deep to get to the essence of what's going on. And so the full moon may have revealed it to us emotionally, but as we go through the rest of the lunar cycle over the next 2 weeks, it's up to us to actually take the initiative to do something with that vision, or the universe is going to do it for us. That often is the case, and that's when people struggle with what they come to realize emotionally at the full moon, and then don't do anything to fulfill the entire lunar cycle's intention, which started at the new moon. And in this case, it really was and has been about the mature perspective that's gained when you take these two contrasting positions and they work together like 2 feet walking, right? You can't have one without the other. I mean, there are plenty of people who are capable with only 1 foot or 1 leg, and that's not about that. This is more of a symbolic reference of the need for 2 sides to be working concurrently with each other, but they are contrasting. So a lot of this imagery right now. So how was that full moon for you guys? I am real curious to see how people are feeling, how it went for you. So drop it in the comments, drop it in the chat if you feel so called to share with us. You know, Saturday was a 13-year anniversary. I wanted to share that with you just because coming into the 14th year of my partnership is also the 14 is definitely the Sagittarius card. And we're going to see it. It's right in the middle of the reading. You know, I can't make this stuff up. It is coming out on its own. And I think that's really interesting that that's coming up. So the reason I want to share that, besides the fact that we got through year 13 seemingly unscathed in terms of relationship, is that, you know, for those of you who are in the process of reconciling opposition, right? The art of alchemy, finding sincere purpose and meaning in those relationships, even in the friction of those relationships, right? It was at the lowest point of my life that this person came into my life, and vice versa. This person was also coming out of a very dark time in his life as well. And you know, oftentimes those relationships that are lasting. And if you saw me before, if you knew me before this person came into my life, what a hot mess I was in so many ways and so many reasons that I can't go into right now. But it's quite a contradiction in itself to look at the way that I was addressing and interacting with relationships and sexuality and my own body and emotional responsibility and a sense of soul sovereignty. It was definitely a hot mess. And so it took, you know, hitting that darkest point in my life in order to be capable, honestly, of being in and valuing a relationship based on mutual respect, based on legitimate and unconditional love, and also to be able to handle the things that come about, as you know, in the course of being in relationship. There's no way that you don't have friction in your closest relationships. That's part of the 9th house as well. The wisdom that develops in the course of actually being in your relationships is where that wisdom develops. And so I'm very grateful. And it was a very nice weekend. It was low key, and just appreciating each other and just kind of going on with life. So I really appreciated the fact that that was on the same day as the Sagittarius full moon. So, hold fast. Whatever it is that you're looking for, if you're looking for that balance, that reconciliation, if you feel that contrast, and truly with Lilith and Cancer coming back into Cancer right now, the way that we may attempt to fulfill or fill the void or find ourselves, when we feel powerless to attempt to compensate for that, especially in Cancer, right, where we feel safe and secure, our most intimate and private life and relationships. It's our character, sometimes, I don't want to say often, but many times, and I can speak from experience as a person, that we will attempt to overcompensate in really unhealthy ways when we feel disconnected, when we don't feel like we're in our power, when we're frustrated and feel cut off, because Black Moon Lilith is the shadow of the feminine, and there are lots of ways that we compensate in unhealthy ways. And now that Lilith's back in Cancer, the true Lilith, it's just something to be aware of. Venus is now in Leo, though, so we'll get into that Grand Cross and all of the Venus opposite Pluto today, the Grand Cross. We'll get into all the astrology. I want to focus on that right now because there's a lot happening in that way. So, but I wanted to keep this Uriel and the Sphinx up so that we can kind of keep focused on Antares and the heart of the Scorpion being conjunct this full moon, right? It's a very powerful and sometimes a very violent type of star to have right next to the full moon. So even that, we have to deal with reconciling with the fire that is presented to us, and the steam that might be created, right, can be very powerful. If you've ever been burned by steam, then you know that it's nothing to mess with. So I also wanted to put up real quick just to keep people aware that these offerings are still here because we do have our solstice coming. So this is a great opportunity to get a jump on your seasonal forecast between now and basically September. People are kind of throwing some dates around, and people are kind of feeling all kinds of ways about what's happening. So, but the astrology, you don't have to really rely on anyone else telling you what is or what isn't, their insiders, their dates or whatever. You just look at the mathematical geometric configuration in relation to you, and you're like, this gives me an idea of what to expect, where the challenges are. Be aware of certain days or weeks that maybe you should pay attention to some things so you don't make decisions that might set you back, or just be more patient with your process as well. So that's it's linked from the description box below directly to where you can book that and pay for it. The Starseed astrology sale is still going on. It's 25% discounted on everything, including the package, which includes your natal chart, the full Starseed reading, and then one-on-one FaceTime or Zoom or whatever works for you, and that's built into the package. So at 25% off, it's pretty good. And I will say, starting next week, my time is going to start getting more limited for readings. So it's something that you want to think and plan ahead. I'm not going to have a lot of time to do last minute things in terms of readings. So, and of course, budget and finances, I totally understand. You got to be able to have those things to be able to book and have the energetic resources available. So if that's an issue for you, and you know that you want to get these readings, but you know you're not going to have funds until later, you can always email me and let me know your situation so we can at least get things moving. So that's what that is. And I'm going to keep, I'm going to take Uriel away. So I'm going to check in with the stream here, make sure it's all good. See if there's any comments here. Star T says, seriously loved that full moon. Problem solved, something that required me to think outside the box. Oh, you mean like how you poked your head through the firmament and manifest a dream that I thought wasn't ready to manifest. It was a breakthrough. And congrats on your anniversary. Well, thank you, Star T. I really appreciate that. the neighbor at one point came over, and we were just both like, we opened the pool and, staining the deck, very homebody type of preparing for the summer energy. And I'm outside, working with plants and all kinds of stuff. And the neighbor comes over, and at one point he wanted us to come over to his house. And Seth's like, no, it's our anniversary. We're going to, do our thing. And he's just like, oh, congratulations. And he's like, 13 years of suffering. And it was like, bam. I was like, nah, I have not suffered. Not a single moment. It was a little dicey at first, I'm not going to lie. But that wasn't a result of anything, it wasn't suffering. I mean, it was suffering, but it was self-imposed at that point. So I also am congratulating myself. So thank you. I do appreciate that. So one thing I want to show you in terms of the geomagnetics and the solar weather, just to keep ourselves focused on what is actually happening energetically, because, if you're not paying attention to your biofield and how it is being modulated and influenced by not only the natural geomagnetics, but also too probably how that's being hacked. I wouldn't even say probably, I would say for sure that this Schumann is hacked. And I've said that for a while and really started to become suspicious many, many months ago in terms of that. And it has been confirmed in many ways to me that that is the case. So, but in terms of this solar weather, and congrats, Star T, on your breakthrough. I think that, for Sag people, for the most part, even if the breakthrough didn't feel good, it was still a big breakthrough for people. So I wanted to share this with you, if it will actually work. Which is that there was a magnetic filament that erupted on the sun, and you can see in NASA's Enlil spiral, it has this CME that's probably going to just graze us. So if you see this yellow dot here right on the meridian, that's Earth right here. So as the CME or the filament erupted and the CME projected out, you can see that we're probably going to get a glancing blow. So just be aware that the flaring is starting to settle just a tiny, tiny bit. Hello, Rogue Reemerged. Good morning to you. Sorry, guys. I just popped over real quick and saw the comment and just wanted to acknowledge the people showing up. And anyway, so back to the Enlil spiral, we see that there's going to probably be a glancing blow in the next couple of days. There doesn't appear to be any big coronal holes, but that can also change in a hot minute. So the other thing is just showing you the magnetic filament. So it's turning away, which is why it's more of a side swipe than a direct Earth-facing CME. So there's this magnetic filament that's blasting off and sending a CME off into the distance, but we probably will get a glancing blow of that. So I just wanted to share that with you before we move on and get to the reading. So here we go. And that's what I'm going to do. We're going to get right into the reading today. It's amazing. I'm still amazed. And I think having that sense of wonder and appreciation for these types of modalities, even after decades of practicing it and not questioning it anymore, I still find myself pleased and delighted that it comes out the way that it does, because it shows that I'm still, for the most part, on track and doing the right things that I need to be doing in order to be at least a catalyst, right? And then also a conduit in many ways. So with our reading today, at the center of it is, in fact, number 14, the card of temperance, or in the Thoth Tarot, the art, or the art of alchemy. This is the Sagittarius card. It's at the center. So the thing is that regardless of how you may be interpreting things, how you may be adjusting to this full moon, right? You may have somebody might have forced your face outside of the firmament. Maybe you've made decisions that have drawn you to that place emotionally, despite not really intending to. Some people intentionally, right, have taken that step. Somebody like Star T that had a huge breakthrough as a Sag person and realized and had a really powerful moment of manifestation, or at least a realization of manifestation that is really, really big for this person. So however you came across this full moon, just know that at the center of all of this, as I'm going to unpack it, we are here. It's up to us now to do the reconciliation, to find a place where these opposing forces not only come together in terms of problem, reaction, solution as a Hegelian dialectic, which is kind of stuck in Gemini, right? Maybe you get into Virgo in terms of analysis, but honestly, it's in Sagittarius where we alchemize the opposition into something brand new. It's synthesis, right? You come to a new conclusion, and this is where wisdom really is generated. The Hegelian dialectic lives in this place of problem, reaction, solution, which then creates another problem and then a reaction solution, right? You stay kind of in this feedback loop in Gemini in the third house of consistently, and it's endless, it's infinite, right? Mutable air is basically anything is on the table, and it's just this process endlessly of this dialectic. The art, and that's a strictly left brain thing, right? It is just very a logical process. The art, the right brain, the alchemy is something that you can't rationalize. It is something where the Holy Spirit, if you want to consider that, right? And I'm not trying to make this about any one religion or belief system. I'm using this as an example. And truly, for me at this point, this heart fire that comes into the Sagittarian alchemy is the dispensation that comes from the Holy Spirit, right? And so something new comes in and is born as a result of this. We're at the center of it right now. So the thing is, what I'm seeing in this reading, despite that they're energetically, this vertical axis is very powerful, that we've reached a point where there's a great release, which is really, really favorable. The energy coming into this moment is a little less, it's a little volatile, I will have to say, the Princess of Wands. And so this is where we're gonna start, so that we can understand if some people are just like, whoa, what is happening? It's because it's starting here in this place. So let me bring up the Princess of Wands. So we haven't seen her in a while. There was a time where she was coming out like every week, right? And in personal readings, it was very consistent. So we see the Hearth Fire, which is Vesta, by the way, in Taurus, about to be conjunct with Mercury. Vesta is one of the 4 main asteroids in our solar system, and Vesta or Hestia, she was the goddess of the hearth flame. So the Princess of Wands is Venus in the fire signs, and Venus now is in Leo, right? Opposite Pluto as of today. And she's very passionate in Leo. She's very much a diva in Leo. It is very much about wanting to be paid attention to pull in attraction, as it were, and to be very focused upon. Venus is about love and beauty and harmony. And she also, as the ruler of Libra, is about symmetry and aesthetic beauty and balance and fairness and just, as the lady that holds the scales. But in Princess of Wands, she's very much Venus as the earth in the fire signs, which normally don't fit together, right? It's the masculine and feminine, but they are not opposite. It's more of an inconjunct. Anyway, so Venus is now in Leo. So when this card, as it came out in its position where it was not quite upright and not quite at its worst. It's not quite at its worst, I will say, but she's not exactly at her best. So this is Earth in the element of fire, okay, which is Venus in Leo right now. So there's endless powerful energies. There's an insatiable hunger for life, right? Passion is hot and explosive. One thing about this card is burning down the object of desire, right? Because she wants so much, right? Venus wants, she attracts, she wants, she is about objects of desire, right? The fact that it's so hot and combust that you get too close to her, then you basically catch on fire, right? And I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. What I'm saying is that this is the fire that I think is bringing us into this alchemical moment of the full moon. So on her shadow side, at her absolute worst, is unable to feel real compassion, right? Faithless and self-indulgent, because it's all about her, right? As Venus, as this feminine energy, lacking all true warmth of heart, unable to feel real compassion, and can sink into pure greed and cruelty, right? Where does greed come from? Well, greed is wanting more than what is what is yours, right? And doing anything you can to get it. And Venus being the ruler of Taurus, I mean, that's, she will attract it. And when it is in the fire signs, especially as she's in Leo, right? The gravity pulls things in so much that you can't get away, right? Burning down the object of the desire. Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with this card. And when we have these court cards, of course, this is people in our lives. This is elements of us as individuals as opposed to archetypal experiences. So we are, or someone in our life is representing this kind of dynamic. So how does she function at her best for us or as us, right? By allowing us to leave our old fears behind, right? The purification and purging of fire, the freedom we gain when we release old restrictions and habits. Does this look like an individual that's afraid of anything other than riding the flame, dancing in the flames, right? So there's freedom when we release these restrictions and habits or whatever they are, right? When we examine our motives, we realize we may have collected a lot of garbage along the way. Didn't we just do a Starseed ministry about leaving the garbage behind? This suggests to me that that there is an element and there is a part of us that wants to do this, but we're not fully embodying it in a way. And I think that's the opposition to Pluto with Venus today in this grand cross that we'll get into. So when we limit ourselves by failing to clean out our garbage, right? And again, fire purifies the heart of the scorpion, right? Antares, Archangel Uriel. There's a purification by fire here. And the best way to use this energy is releasing your fears and allowing yourself to be filled with confidence, right? There's no fear involved with this individual. She is in total confidence. It's very playful. It's very passionate. It's very enthusiastic. There's courage here. And there's a sense that, you got this tiger that's wrapped around, and she's got these huge antennae here to be able to pick up on what may be in the future or in her path that she may need to be aware of. The fact that this card has come out in its horizontal position is saying that there has been a rough entry into this, or the fire that is coming into our alchemical process is not in its fullest integrity, okay? Or we are carrying emotional baggage with it. It hasn't burned off yet. So keep this in mind when we look at what this effect is, and in terms of this is a causal factor reaching this energetic axis here. Now, the art of alchemy, this is the heart of it. This is the Sagittarius card. Everything about this gives you exactly what you need to know, right? You're bringing fire and water together. Normally, they would cancel each other out in different ways, but if you bring them together in the right proportions, in the right process, you get something called steam, right? And steam turns turbines. Steam does all kinds of amazing things. And there's this process of sublimation in many ways when you have these two brought together, right? You have the phoenix and you have this white cat and you have these two faces of this individual bringing these together. It's all about the art of the alchemy, okay? As opposed to just the very robotic or very empirical Hegelian dialectic. And of course, the sun in Gemini and Juno, talk about other asteroids, especially Juno, that really is very much at home in Gemini in many ways, because she is first of all, she is the goddess who is the wife of Zeus, right? Or Jupiter. So you have Jupiter ruling the ninth house, ruling Sagittarius, and his counterpart, Juno, I think really probably rules Gemini and Libra to a certain extent as an asteroid, is in opposition. And so she is not so much holding the scales, but she is able to represent and be an advocate, right? If Jupiter is the lawyer in the courtroom, then Juno is the advocate for what is balanced, what is reconciliation, right? And it is advocating for people, and if you've ever been in that situation or are familiar with it, right? Your courtroom advocate is someone who's not your lawyer. They're there to advocate for your defense or for your justice or whatever. So Juno's also in Gemini, along with the sun. And so we have plenty of energy right now to focus on and feel a sense of representation and balance in terms of these opposing mental forces, right? And that starts there. But at the heart of it here is this alchemy, the perfect balance, the right mixture, sides that have been previously ignored. Ooh, this is a big one. Should be experienced. Do you remember our new moon conjunct Algol in the Pleiades? Contrasting perspectives must be considered for mature perspective. So either you intentionally did it, or the universe kind of forced you into it, or decisions you made brought you to this place. Maybe they were unintentionally bringing in the contrast, but here you are. So contrast should be put together, right? Remain calm even when life feels frantic and stressful, because this is about that perfect balance and the reconciliation of contradictions, which is the inspiration for today's Starseed Ministry title. So a good mantra for this might be, my life shapes itself in a perfect pattern, right? That perfect pattern being the pattern of meaning, the sincere purpose, the tapestry of all of the threads woven together into something more than the sum of its parts, okay? A meaning. And there needs to be this creative, transformative aspect of this, which is why it's called the art of alchemy, not necessarily just the science of it, right? This is at the heart. It's here. We're all dealing with this right now in our own way. So what I find very interesting energetically, and this is something that I think is going to give a lot of insight and strength to people, is that the Two of Scrolls, which is the two worlds. Now the scrolls in Akashic Tarot are the mind, right? It's the swords. The scrolls is a little less like, cutting and more of like, keeping track. The scrolls have all of the information written on them. So when you see this card, the Two of Scrolls, the two worlds, it's talking about, again, a dichotomy of your spiritual life and your material life, which most of us and many people still consider those things to be separate, right? That the pursuance of your material and financial realm can't really be reconciled with your spiritual practice, your spiritual life, whatever it is. So when this card comes out reversed, it is reversed in terms of where our power is coming from, right? Those lower chakras, our connection to the planet, our connection to a sense of security and connection to what is, right? Where our root system is and how we draw our power into our experience. When it's reversed, this is one of great release. Have the opportunity to act on your highest ideals and convictions. I think that this really shows that we have especially you got the Wolverine here again. We have everything we need. We're a lot tougher than we think we are, and there is a release here. We may have been torn between these two worlds. Oh, you mean when we popped our head out through the firmament and we're like, oh my God. Yeah, because you want to pop back in maybe. Or in the Truman Show, what he did was just like, I'm out, right? You're trying to bust through. You may have been torn between these two worlds, but now you've discovered a greater sense of truth. This is very telling about how far we've come and how powerful this full moon really is for people. Once you may have been worried that striving for your spiritual goals would put your personal life at some risk, right? And for many people who chose not to participate in certain medical interventions over the last couple of years, I think that, those of us who had to be put in this position to begin with know exactly what this is, and we've already reaped the benefits and rewards of being like, you know what, I am sticking to my integrity and my spiritual focus and not as focused on, okay, what am I going to lose, right? And this is not a judgment on people who believe me. I am surrounded by people, immediate family, who made decisions based on the material aspect because they have children, they have mortgages, they have all kinds of responsibilities that they need to be taken care of. So it's not a judgment. What I'm saying is that there are many of us who've already gone through this process in some way, shape, or form. That's just an example. Once you've been worried that striving for your spiritual goals would put your personal life at some risk. And yeah, maybe that's happened. Now you're taking steps to integrate the two, right? It's not just about the Hegelian dialectic. It is truly about transmutation and catalyzing that integration. The soul becomes the driving force in your life, not material fears, not a sense of finances, for instance, right? Because you can see this person has the spinning wheel and all of their stuff, and they're kind of facing away from the window. And if you look out in the window, it's got all these Tibetan prayer flags, and this individual, this woman, is facing inward towards the fireplace, right? The process of this integration and alchemy comes through the fire. And so there's a contemplation in some ways when this card is upright, but in its reversal, the contemplation is over, right? You're recognizing that the soul, your soul, right, that immortal piece of you that is connected to the Great Spirit is the driving force. And when that's the case, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about these two separate realms staying separate and what to do about it. The soul drives you, and then you respond in a way that it all weaves together into a beautiful mosaic, right? You don't have to keep these things separate necessarily. Now, and this is about designing your own future, right? It kind of manifestation. Now, when we have in terms of where our power is released, the King of Forces. Now I'm a big fan of this card because that's my literal man, right? He is the King of Forces, and anybody that has met him, I'm sure you can attest to this. This is who he is. So I'm partial to this card, but so I can use him as a reference point as well in terms of what this represents. But again, here's another court card, right? This is an individual who is a force within himself, exerting a very calm influence. This is the presence of a man, whether someone in your life, who has powerful and positive energy. There's good intentions, there's honesty that's resonating off this person. So they could be bringing support for a project, a work issue, or just your life in general. So somebody could be coming into your life, somebody is in your life, this may be you, a part of you, this may be a possible love interest. So in order to be open to receiving this man of honor, right? And when I say man of honor, look at this person, right? They are bringing the animals to them, right? This is definitely kind of like a Syrian starseed dude. Right? The wolf and the rabbit are together in harmony. Normally they would be predator-prey. You got this huge stag here, which is also very powerful in terms of the way that you carry yourself and a sense of really strong masculinity. You see this beautiful violet nebula kind of crowning him. Also kind of getting this crown chakra vibe here. And this person is a king and has this little dagger, as his weapon, but he's got no armor, he's got no horse, he's got no helmet. He's just out in the woods next to this natural stream here and is in total power. So this man of honor, in order to be open to receiving this energy, whether it's someone or you have to engage in honoring yourself. And so for you, or a man around you, there could be a position that has to do more with earth energy and nature, right? Any activity. But in terms of individuals, right, this reveals an important side of all of us, right? To exert this calm influence, to bring this honesty and good intention into the way our power is released, right? Feeling the balance and beauty of nature and knowing the powerful force always moving within. Like this person is absolutely calm and powerful and does not question where their power comes from because they got a strong cord right down to that earth star chakra, right? And like I said, this is kind of like a Syrian starseed dude. And again, I can make a personal reference to this, also knowing that person's chart, which is my partner. He is so much of this person. So, and with the Two of Scrolls being reversed as well, I mean, there is a release of this tension and this opposition through our hearts that is really where we're going to alchemize whatever seems to be in opposition here and release it into a role that is this calm and confident in our connection to the natural energies, to the world around us, okay? This is really very powerful and is probably our saving grace right now. It just seems to me me that even though it's a rough entry here with the Princess of Wands in terms of that fire and how it got started and what it's doing to us and how we are responding to it, this axis is very powerful and shows that we have the potential truly to step into this role right here as the King of Forces, or have this person come into our life because we are, breaking down the resistance now and allowing this type of energy into our lives somehow. Now, the Prince of Discs, also reversed, which also suggests to me, so you have these bookends of cause and effect here showing that now the Prince is the heir of Earth. So we have Venus, which is the Earth of Fire, the Princess of Wands, and now we have the heir of Earth. So on both sides, fundamentally, there is an aspect of materiality, the nuts and bolts of life, and different expressions of those things. Now, when the Prince of Discs appears, this is an individual. Again, there's a lot of court cards here. The princess, the king, and the prince. This is a stable, industrious person. They are unwavering. They are enduring. They are reliable, reasonable, careful. This is a great person to have around. Now, sometimes they get so focused on what their goal is, of what they're building or creating, that they can be a little emotionally weak, especially when we're talking about the prince, because that is air-oriented. So, but much like this bull, right? And anybody who's a Taurus or knows strong Taurus people, again, I could speak from personal experience, is Ferdinand, right, out there sniffing the flowers. But the minute this person gets pushed to anger, it's very slow to forgive. I have seen this in action, right? It is, once the bull is seeing red, it is very slow to forgive. So you really have to piss this person off a lot, okay? Especially in terms of how grounded and industrious and focused they really are, right? And you can see that it's the bull that's pulling this chariot. It's got the globe. It does have a helmet, but is naked. It's, he's nude otherwise, which also suggests a certain amount of transparency, right? Just putting yourself out there. And lots of circles. Everything about this, there's a lot of circles and cycles along with this, right? There's not a lot of angles, which I think is really interesting. Even this cross up here. So when it's reversed, some of the worst aspects about this are being stubborn, being ignorant, being corrupt, being greedy, and cold, those types of things. And perhaps that is going to be the case for some people, but based on this axis here, this energetic, especially the King of Forces. And by the way, forces in the Akashic Tarot, as many of you probably already know, is the fire energy, the forces, the transformation, the creativity, the action, right? The forces. It is fire. So at the level of power release here at the top of this, you see these two energies kind of being brought together. But on either side of it, in terms of the experiences that we're having, in our everyday lives or outside of us, this Prince of Discs is going to be reversed. And it just might not be fully realized, right? And Mercury is in Taurus right now, and it is going to cross the Pleiades and Algol very soon. Okay, and so be aware of that as well. Remember what happened when the sun crossed Algol, right? We had a bunch of people exit their, life, right? And that was Dr. Rashid Buttar, Tina Turner, people in our personal lives. I know, it definitely came up. So when Mercury crosses over Algol and the Pleiades, there is a different energy associated with it, and it may not be. This reversal feels a lot like what that's going to be. Now, in terms of Greek mythology, Mercury was the offspring of Zeus, right? Jupiter. And so these two are opposite in the astrology, in the zodiac. Mercury ruling Gemini, Jupiter ruling Sag, the 3rd and 9th house, diametrically opposed of what you know, what you believe, what you know, what you understand. So Mercury was the offspring of Jupiter and one of the seven sisters in the Pleiades. So there's a little bit more familiarity with Mercury crossing the Pleiades and Algol. And at some point, I'll look at the software and see how close Mercury is going to be to either of these things as it comes into its longitudinal conjunction. So it's I don't get the sense that it's going to necessarily be all of those negative things about the Prince of discs in terms of being greedy and stubborn, but there can be some of that, right? There could definitely be some stubbornness. There can definitely be slowness to forgive. There can definitely be this sense of grief and bereavement as Mercury, and an exteriorization of it, an expression of it. There is movement with this card. It just may not be moving in the direction we necessarily want it to go. There may be some roadblocks or some detours in terms of what we are attempting to grow or to build, right? Because this individual does not like to be thrown off course or distracted from what he is doing. So there may be some irritation when that happens, but that's just all there is to it when Mercury is coming across Algol and the Pleiades. There's something to be released there before Mercury goes home, right? And so just be aware of that too. It may not turn out, there may, like I said, I get in this sense of like a detour or something that kind of pulls us off to, we want to just be going along, doing what we're doing, and something's going to come around to kind of enforce this reversal in some ways. But again, this has a lot to do with the Princess of Wands also not being at her best, right? Something is off about this energy coming into the situation. And so what comes out of it as well, especially in terms of what we're building, what we are growing, all of those discs energies, there's going to be something, imagine this bull is pulling your chariot and then it gets pissed off and starts to charge something, right? That's going to be very difficult to deal with, especially when you're just like going along and being industrious and stable. So, but everything else surrounding it really does suggest that it's okay. And perhaps we need these experiences to continue to reconcile our contradictions, so to speak. So let's look at the things that are surrounding it in terms of guidance and gift-wise. Well, the Wolverine continues to come out, reminding us that we're a lot tougher than we think we are, and especially with these two worlds, right? Because if you are only used to these two aspects of, I can only experience my spirit by going up on the mountain and shoving everyone away and going into total asceticism, or I have to be focused on my material life, my job, my all of the things in order to keep up with that aspect of life. This is saying, I feel like the Wolverine coming together with this it's pretty simple, right? You're a lot tougher than you think you are. You may need to put some effort and to bypass some fear here, right? And that's a big part of this Princess of Wands. I think that we don't quite actually believe that we can move past our fears and our emotional garbage. I think there's still stuff we're hanging on to, which is why this Prince of Discs is going to be kind of moved off course just a little bit. And maybe that's what we need, right? Imagine this axis here of alchemy and transmutation, and the release of our power into this sense of real calm and powerful force that's connected to the natural world and to our own natural energies. Just imagine having maybe that is what's going to kind of veer us into a different direction. But it also is because we haven't really accepted that we can, I think, as a whole, right? And everybody's different, but and some people more than others are recognizing like, oh, look what it feels like when I let go of these restrictions, or burning away all of the unnecessary garbage, kind of like they still do here, right? People still burn their garbage here. And at least they're not burning like all the plastic and stuff, because you can actually recycle that now. When I was a kid, that wasn't really an option. So people burning everything. So the Wolverine, you're a lot tougher than you think you are. And maybe you don't need to consider how you're going to do one or the other, that there is a release here. Now, what I think is very interesting is this hydrothermal ventilation. So, of course, many people in the realm of planetary science, for instance, have come to at least a certain conclusion or a hypothesis that life really started in the oceans around these vents, right, that are coming up from inside the earth, right, where it's really hot and sulfuric, but life actually is able to develop and be sustained here, certain types of life. Now, this is very interesting when it's reversed. The hydrothermal ventilation is reversed, suggesting that there is not ventilation. In fact, there is pressure building here. Okay, so you're a lot tougher than you think you are, because guess what? We're not really necessarily quite there in terms of releasing this. Now, this is saying the power that we have is in releasing the contradiction or the two worlds that we think are separate. But this is also suggesting to me that, yes, there's a stirring and a pressure and opposing forces, but when it's reversed like this, it also suggests to me that there is, maybe there's a holding back. Maybe it's going to be explosive, and opposites attract each other. How do you think the friction happens in Sagittarius? It's because the two opposing forces come together and they create the friction that catalyzes the reaction. So there is a backup of pressure here, and a sense of explosiveness that I think is necessary. It's going to be, and this Princess of Wands, I'm telling you, unless she's fully upright, she can be her own worst enemy in many ways. But again, the pressure building up in this and not being ventilated right away is also how we get to have this release. And maybe it's very destructive, but the Wolverine is like, you are more powerful and tougher than you think you are. You may feel like this is going to destroy me, but is it? Maybe poking your head out through the veil and coming back and having to reconcile that, yeah, it's really intense. But it also is going to fortify who you are and who you want to be. Now, the great grand fairy spirit. So when we're talking about the king of forces, this is an individual or a part of us that is completely tapped into not only the geomagnetics, right? The natural Schumann resonance, the natural energies of the planet. This is a person who is anchored into their local ley lines and able to attenuate to it, right? And the great grand fairy spirit surrounding this is about deeper truths, our ancestors, and signs from guides. But you are not going to get those things unless you are this king of forces, in my opinion, right? So this is suggesting that, and of course, fairy spirits are like elementals, right? They're fourth dimensional beings that are really only accessible by people who are, well, you're either just like a completely open book, or you are tapped in and strongly connected to the natural environment to the point where these energies are revealing themselves to you. And this can come through synchronicities, like I said, ancestors, especially the ancestors connected to your land, your guides, the elementals, the guardians of your land, whatever it is. It's available here. Now, this is really the capstone, in my opinion, of all of this. Now, the octopus. It says, practice shape-shifting by altering your physical appearance and mannerisms. Now, the octopus is an animal that does shapeshift, right? Have you ever watched an octopus get through a tiny hole or something? They are able to change their shape because of basically the plasticity of their entire body, right? They also have the 8 limbs, which I think is very interesting as well. They also can camouflage themselves. The color of their skin changes to reflect their inner experience. So there's fear, there's frustration, there is relaxation, there is all the range, right? And so the octopus is going to change its outer features. It's the color of its skin. So if you've ever seen that happen before, it's pretty remarkable. And so that's where the shape-shifting, the camouflage, being adaptable comes in. There's something about walking in other people's shoes that also is part of what this card in particular, like if you look at the guide for this card in the Stephen D. Farmer deck, it's the Messages from Your Animal Spirit Guides by Stephen D. Farmer. That's what this deck is. And when you look at octopus, it does talk about walking in another person's shoes, right? Being able to adapt to the experience as a whole of being one with everyone, right? And not just as an idea, which is great. And that's the 11th house, and that's Aquarius. That is a mental, albeit a higher mind and higher minded mental experience of what, connected to everything means in terms of a network, right? This is about experiencing it in real time and in your emotional state. And, the octopus lives in the ocean, right? They live within that medium as well. This really suggests to me, at least, that one of the best ways, I think, for us to align with this king of forces, either within us or to attract this person into our lives, or, to find a role that this really relates to, right, which is being connected to natural energies. There's something very important about the ability to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, to shapeshift as almost a shamanic practice, not to deceive anyone or to get into spaces that we're not supposed to be in, but to be adaptable and to basically accept that when you are in that Piscean 12th house energy, that this is where empathy and compassion and forgiveness really come in. And so it doesn't mean that you have to let go of who you are, but this also suggests that we're going to get a lot further, I think, by being able to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, to be adaptable. Maybe you do need to camouflage yourself a little bit. Maybe you just have to shift your shape just a little bit, and then you realize that you have access to a deeper truth or some sort of guidance that is going to allow you to release this energy in this masterful way. But the octopus, we haven't seen this in a while, so I thought it was very interesting that it came out. And of course, your read on these cards and the way that they're put together is really the most important, right? I'm just giving you my interpretation based on my experiences, based on my own intuitive sense of what this is. But ultimately, you take it for what it's worth for you, and then you apply it to your life. That's what this is all about. So that's today's reading. So I'm going to bring up the astrology chart here, and I'm going to check in with the stream real quick and see if there's any questions or any comments that I can respond to. I thank you all so much for your participation. Even if you're catching this on the replay, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. You know the drill. It does really help get the algorithm to spread this out to larger groups of people. There we go, window capture. So here's our chart for today. So of course, if you're part of the Starseed Fellowship, you're going to be getting your weekly astrology here in the next day or so. And we do have a third quarter moon that's going to be coming on Saturday. So we'll be talking a lot about that in that report. But let me check the stream here and see what's going on. So let's see. Star T says, actually, that Princess of Wands card looks exactly how I just described. Finding the flow with eagerness to start moving forward again. Absolutely. I totally agree. Rogue Reemerge says, the art of alchemy, not the science of alchemy. Perfectly stated. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you're picking up what I'm putting down there, Rogue. I busted through the firmament. Haha. And yes, so true. The art of alchemy. And Mama Wolf Memory says, sorry I'm late, but glad I made it for a little live. Much Monday morning love. I love you, Mama Wolf Memories. It's good to see you. You must be very busy these days. Rogue says, you're right on time, and I agree, right? There's only divine timing, right? What is the card deck with the hydrothermal ventilation card? Great question. So I'm going to put it in the chat real quick, but it's called the Raven's Eye Oracle. And this deck was created by an artist who has a studio in Seaside, Oregon. This is her artwork, and she made the deck based on the artwork and not the other way around. Like, she does her artwork, and then she created this Oracle deck based on it. And in January, when I was out there with my partner visiting, right, because he was born and raised, and we lived in Portland for, I lived there for 15 years. That's where we met. He was born and raised in Portland. So in January, we went back, did the family thing, visited people. We went out to Seaside, walked into this place, and as I was kind of thumbing through the deck, my mother-in-law basically was like, "Do you like that?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool. I actually really like this." And so she's like, "Well, I'll just get it for you," which was really kind of her. And so that's the same trip where we went into the antique shop, and there was that Zoltan fortune teller machine from Big, and we all got our fortunes just for shits and giggles. And the one that I got was talking about me going into the Caribbean. And that was when we'd already booked that trip, and we were basically attempting to entice my mother-in-law into coming with us. And so when I got that fortune, it was like, "I see you in the tropical waters of the Caribbean, reconnect to Mother Nature in the waters." I was like, "Yep, this whole experience out on the Pacific Ocean is where it's at." Anyway, that's where the Raven's Eye Oracle deck came from. So if you get it, just know you're supporting a local artist, and her studio and the work that she does. And I think that there are some people that said that I'm not on Instagram, but I'm pretty sure she's on Instagram, and with her other work. And she also had another really interesting thing that she did as an artist. She made these like dolls based on, she would do like a, intuitive read of you, and she would make a doll for you, like there was a very shamanic type of thing that was made based on the artistic inspiration from doing an intuitive read on the person or the client. And I thought that I've never seen that. Not to say it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I never saw that in that context before. And I thought that was very interesting. Not like a voodoo doll or anything. It's nothing like that. So, but the Raven's Eye Oracle was a gift, and I met that artist, and that's how I got her work. So you can check her out. Like I said, on Instagram, I'm pretty sure. Probably Facebook too, but Raven's Eye Oracle. Anyway, let's move on to the astrology, shall we? Now, here is June 5th. This is today's astrology. So here's this grand cross, as you may be able to see. Now, our moon is in Capricorn, so we're going to talk about that because it is now out of Sagittarius. So what happens when we transition from the 9th to 10th house, or Sag to Capricorn, right? Capricorn's got a reputation of being just very serious and very, industrious, kind of like that Prince of Discs. Oh, that's very interesting. Moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn, you're moving from the 9th house to the 10th house. And so what does that really represent? Well, it represents that purpose, that meaning, that understanding, that wisdom, that tapestry crystallizes into actual systems that are organizational, that provide for the social welfare, the family welfare. It's the 10th house. It's your career. It's your contribution to society. So that transition from Sagittarius, which is all horizon and big picture, and it's all hot air, right? And I say this as a Sagittarius person, right? It's all hot air because it's all the big picture, right? It is the transition into Capricorn is like, okay, this crystallizes into the law of nature, right? Into the unfolding of the sacred geometry of life, okay? The matrix. The idea that it crystallizes into actual structures. And as the moon now is in Capricorn and will be here over the next couple of days, this is where our emotionally, the living soul or intuition, it does start to become more serious. We start to emotionally tap into aspects that are bigger than us. It's our contribution emotionally to it, but these are structures that are built. They're not as easily torn down. Sagittarius is all big ideas, so they can always expand. For every time you weave a new thread of knowledge, which is down here in Gemini, every time you weave a new thread of knowledge into the tapestry, it changes the entire tapestry. It is never meant to crystallize or solidify. Because as soon as it does, it becomes very difficult to undo that. And of course, Pluto has been doing the work of Pluto on these institutions now since 2008 when it first came in. And there are some very significant things that we can go back and be like, oh, 2008, what happened during that time? So, and Pluto's going to come back into Capricorn very, very soon. And I talked about how the controlled downturn and demolition of these institutions is going to turn back, it's going to become that much more exposed, that much more intense when Pluto comes back into Capricorn. It's going to be like the next iteration of either taking advantage of what has been exposed and eliminated, or we just have to become more aware basically of what's already been destroyed with the retrograde. So Venus is now opposite Pluto, and this Grand Cross is the axis of the moon's node. So now that the moon is here in Capricorn, and we'll go over some transits today just to kind of give some foundation and context, we are going to start emotionally taking things more seriously, getting more industrious, emotionally considering more than just our own self and how we feel. The thing is, the moon is at her detriment in Capricorn. She is opposite her home, which is Cancer. What is down here in Cancer? Oh, Lilith, right? The lunar apogee, that space that we attempt to fill the void when we feel separated from Great Spirit or God or whatever, our ability to feel safe. So keep in mind that there will be an opposition eventually with the moon, and which means the moon is like a super moon right now. It means that the moon is as close as it's going to get to the Earth in its orbit. So, and if you saw the full moon, my Lord, it was massive. And that just is going to continue to be the case as the moon is at its perigee. Just be aware that the moon is at her detriment here. She is not, but that might actually work in our favor in terms of emotionally considering more than just ourselves, emotionally considering the entire structure of the family, of the, the industry that we're part of, right? Whatever that 10th house, what is our contribution? What is our mission? That's often what I'll talk about with clients in terms of their 10th house. Yes, mundanely, your career, but really, what are you contributing to societally and structurally that provides not just for you, but for everyone that you're connected to? So things get a little bit more serious, but we also kind of get down to what we emotionally need to do. There's a sense of responsibility here. The good news is that there will be a sextile to Saturn, which, rules Capricorn. And the moon is fairly happy in Pisces. So there is definitely some mutual understanding when that sextile happens today that's going to allow for some emotional stability, self-discipline, security, and we'll get into that. Anyway, here's this Grand Cross. Right? This is not necessarily a grand square, although those are very similar. It's just showing that these tensions are meeting in the middle. And we're talking about the tensions of the moon's nodal axis, right? The undulating pattern of the dragon, or our own soul's trajectory. And then the crossover, the grand cross of Venus opposite Pluto. Now this transit, and I've talked about this multiple times, and now it's exact as of today. You can even see, as of 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Venus is at 0 degrees, 0 minutes of Leo, just now coming in. This opposition oftentimes will be kind of like that. It can be like that Princess of Wands, where it makes personal relationships very intense, and people can get very obsessed. They can be compulsive about relationships, and Venus is in Leo, right? She's like, it's all about me, right? And not so much how I feel emotionally. That was more in Cancer. Now it's very combust. Now it's very passionate, very hot, very burning down the object of one's desire, right? And in this case, with Leo being the sign of the sun, the gravity of the situation. I mean, Venus could easily become like her own black hole in some ways. Now, the opposition to Pluto is what kind of keeps that from happening. But it also brings all these power dynamics out in relationships. It brings all of this oppositional tension between the heart and the rest of the system, which Pluto is exposing the system and how it's already been, what aspects have already been destroyed as it's come into Aquarius. So it's like people, if it's one thing to poke your head out through the firmament and be like, holy shit, I cannot believe this is what's happening. And then Venus is just like, blah, right? It's kind of past that now. And the opposition of Pluto is forcing us to actually reconcile this as well. And especially with this grand cross with the nodal axis of the moon, with the north node at 3 to 4 Taurus, it's like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Again, the dragon and the nodal axis can become very obsessed. It's important that we are aware of how much obsession and compulsion is written into this, especially this grand square, and where that energy is going to direct us, right? And there's really no resolving this. You just have to know that the tensions are here, and maybe this X marks the spot type of energy is where we need to be focusing. But oftentimes with Venus opposite Pluto, just in general, take the signs out of it, people become compulsive, obsessive. They can use their magnetic and attractive quality of Venus and the power of Pluto, the sexual power of Pluto, to basically overpower people to get what you want, right? There's a lot of that energy right here. And then with the nodal axis of the moon, especially the north node that is pulling us in a way that's like it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We better be very clear with ourselves what that pot of gold is, if it's worth the journey, and is it the journey or is it the pot of gold that is always elusive? It's never really there, because the secret is the journey is the pot of gold. Right? The pot of gold is your relationship to God or a great spirit or your higher self, right? But you don't realize that till you go on the journey, right? So this is intense. It's very intense. And the full moon was exactly kind of like that moment of like, okay, this is where the culmination is. This is how, the culmination of relationships that are going to sustain us and that are part of our purpose, and the relationships, even though they are part of our purpose, that are disintegrating. If we're trying to hold, and of course, Pluto is all about that disintegration, elimination, destruction, transformation. Okay? So knowing where Leo and Aquarius is in your chart probably give you a good indication of what area of life this is bringing up for you. The tendency here is, especially with Lilith in Cancer and Mars also in Leo, the tendency here is to make it all about ourselves. And that's not to say that we shouldn't we got to find the balance here, right? Because if we give ourselves over to the collective completely, which it's very difficult with Pluto, right? We have no choice but to kind of live through this, what Pluto is representing. And the moon coming into Capricorn now is going to make us very emotionally responsible for the structures and the institutions that we're contributing to, and kind of taking our emotional, personal perspective kind of away from what it is about individual expression down here. But still, Venus and Mars, they're in a wide conjunction right now. So those two aspects of the feminine and masculine coming together in the sign about lust and the Kundalini, right? This is very, very powerful. So just be aware of this tension, right? Don't do things. Be aware of the potential to utilize your magnetic qualities of Venus and Leo to attract to you what you think you want. But maybe if you emotionally, it's hard, but if you can emotionally feel into and adapt to how is this all crystallizing into structures and forms, perhaps that'll give you some insight onto how to make the most of this tension. So other things to look at as we move forward through the rest of the day here. So let me find my notes here. Like I said, Mercury is in Taurus, Mars is in Leo, Jupiter is ruling this full moon. And I will say that Jupiter moving into the 4 to 5 degrees Taurus, we remember this, right? The widow at an open grave. The impermanence of all bonds, natural bonds, material bonds, social bonds, right? This is very Buddhist in this way of releasing ourselves from the past and facing the void as the challenge. And again, here's Lilith. Talk about the void, right? The shadow of the feminine, right? That where we fight against that sense of void or emptiness because we don't trust that the divine flame will inhabit it when it's on God's time, right? And that's the thing about Capricorn. That is all about divine timing as well. And so maybe, again, we have to kind of emotionally put ourselves in that place of like, it's not just about me. It is about the divine timing that is unfolding right now. And I feel like that's going to really, especially this sextile to Saturn. Let's look at that. I feel like that's going to be really important. Now, before that happens, of course, you can see that there's a trine to the North Node. There's a trine to Jupiter, a moon trine Jupiter. That's really nice for harmony and self-understanding, emotional growth. Jupiter does seem to rule the overall meaning of the relationship and kind of being in a managerial type of position. And so in a trine, an earth trine, no less, with the moon, I feel like that this is a really good moment here to mobilize in some ways. Now, what are we mobilizing towards when Jupiter's like, oh, by the way, like we have to move on from what's already gone, right? And maybe that's what it is. You just pull up your big kid pants here and emotionally and realize like we got to keep moving. Right? And just like Star T said, what a great, let me find it so I can reread it. Finding the flow with eagerness to start moving forward again, right? I feel like this moon trine Jupiter is a big part of this. And even though it's not easy, nobody wants to really stand at the open grave and basically accept that something beautiful that was a valued thing in our lives is gone. But this is a lot of what we're being asked to mobilize, and there's a sense of real optimism and a sense of emotional self-understanding in this moment. I think that this is really good. Now, in terms of this, in terms of helping us make sense of all this. Now, like I said, this sextile to Saturn, which is still opposite Draco, and is now in the degree that is going to station retrograde. So some of the pressure might be released just a little bit when that happens. But in the meantime, Saturn is still basically anchoring us, whether we like it or not. And this sextile is basically going to provide an opportunity for emotional stability and security in our private life, emotional maturity and self-discipline to handle complex issues, to be responsible, to be dependable, to be patient. Oh, you mean all those Prince of Discs things? This is a good moment here to tap into the ways that we can try to align with this so that we can make the most out of that. Responsible, dependable, patient. It's a good time to share deeper, more serious issues with people that you care about, right? The moon in Capricorn. It may not necessarily feel great. You may feel like you're kind of putting yourself out there a little bit, but you may also find that you can have the ability to share these deeper, more serious emotions. And this also has a lot to do with commitment and loyalty to the home and the family. You'll feel very protective of your home and family. And also too, your inner private life, where your power comes from, your root system. And you can often show how you feel and show how you feel in practical ways to the people you care about. That's the moon sextile Saturn. And like I said, the moon is in the sign of Saturn, and Saturn is in a sign that the moon really likes. So there's a mutual respect and understanding in this sextile that really allows for that emotional maturity and self-discipline and responsibility to one's own conscience. When Saturn, that's the thing, like as much as we try to deviate from this point, Saturn just pulls you right back. In some ways it could feel like being on like, if you ever, people who put like their dogs on a run, right? And they're latched in and you can go all over the place, but at the end of the day, you're still latched into this one fixed space. that does limit and does restrict. But this degree in Pisces is truly about staying true to yourself. And so, as long as emotionally the motivation is to really enjoy and to serve the organizational structure that provides for the welfare of everyone involved, I feel like that this is a good aspect to give some emotional maturity and responsibility, when otherwise Lilith down here in Cancer is just like, I don't feel safe, and I'm going to do whatever I can to feel safe, even if it's in in contradiction to my own sense of my conscience, right? Lilith is definitely the shadow feminine, right? There is definitely a thing of toxic femininity and the feminine aspect being shadowed and being used to draw power out of situations in order to give people a false sense of power, right? Lilith is about that space in which the divine flame enters and the Holy Spirit. That's Sagittarius, right? The art of alchemy. You can't force these things, though. And we want to really badly. And then you have Venus opposite, Pluto, that is just making everything so much more intense. So by the end of the day, the moon is going to be in this quincunx with, or an inconjunct with Mars at 9 to 10 degrees. So now we're getting into Lyran Starseed territory. So for those of you who know you have Lyran Starseed markings, this 10 degrees of Capricorn is about overcoming fear and the rewards, right? There is a reward in terms of the work put into trust and overcoming fear. And Lyran Starseeds, that's one of the things that they're really capable naturally of doing, is doing the things that other people are afraid to do, right? Because there's a sense of ambition and knowing what it takes. So the inconjunct with Mars, I think, is really just about how do I do this? How do I actually adjust myself emotionally to overcome my fear, to have trust in the system that I'm part of or contributing to, while Mars in Leo is just like so dynamic and wanting to and wanting to push oneself into this place of, and we're also in a trine to Antares right here. This 9 to 10 degrees of Leo. So that's the other thing, is Mars meeting, in this trine to Antares as well. It's, again, there's this push and there's this projection of our identity, a projection of our personality through the combust creative expression. And I think wanting to get to this place where we want to get past the dark night, basically. And Mars is just like, I'm going to push, I'm going to project myself out there as if I'm past it. And the inconjunct with the moon is just like, no, you actually have to feel into what this is like. And so it's just going to take an adjustment. But this is going to be by the end of the day. So just be aware of that as well. There is a sense of help coming, my friends. So let me get my notes out here, and we'll just real quick do the drive-by here of what to expect in the coming week. So the moon is going to stay in Capricorn. It's going to come into Aquarius, and by the time we get to the 8th, the Venus is going to be in a T-square to the nodes, right? And it's the same thing with all T-squares. You want to look at the ghost point of the T-square in order to see where this energy can be directed. 4 degrees Aquarius. This is where you have to actually take the responsibility to use your spiritual energy that you've developed into healing other people. Oh, imagine that. And Venus is really going to be like, recognize me for everything that I've done. I want people to recognize, I want to be recognized, and I'm going to pull in that recognition so that people understand my efforts. But really, with the T-square, the ghost point is something that has to do with your responsibility to humanity as a whole, which is, it's not about being recognized and fulfilling that ego aspect, although that's important. We do need that. It really, the goal here of this T-square is to recognize that it is our spiritual duty to take our achievements and actually apply them to healing and working with people who haven't gotten there yet. So, you got to check your shit at the door, right? That has a lot to do with that axis, just in general. And we'll be in a disseminating moon by this point, so it's really just conveying the message at this point. It's losing, the moon's losing power. It's in Aquarius, which makes things a little aloof to begin with, but in some ways it's going to kind of take the edge off, and for us to just receive the message without all of the emotional attachment necessarily. So when we get to the 9th, Mercury is going to sextile Neptune, and it's already building, right? Just like I said earlier, Mercury is going to come into conjunction with the Pleiades and Algol, and this is a moment where we can actually receive inspiration. We can mentally become aware of and activate a sense of abundance, I think, by recognizing what is holding us back, right? Now, when the sun did this, it was just, you're just in the experience of expressing yourself through here. And we saw how that went, and it's not always easy. Mercury is a different experience, and the sextile to Neptune is like there's going to be opportunities for real creative breakthroughs, imagination types of breakthroughs, empathy, compassion, right? Service to others. And I think a lot too of really recognizing that everything we need is already here. It may not be clear, it may not be obvious. The fog is turned up with Neptune right now, but Mercury in conjunction with Algol and the Pleiades, I feel like it's going to be more of a, okay, when I release myself, I can release myself from the things that are already, trying to leave my life, because everything I need is already here all the time. We just might need to, mentally become cognizant of that. And I think that sextile is going to be very helpful with that. And then on the 10th, we have our 3rd quarter moon, which is going to be, the moon will be in Pisces, and it will be conjunct it's going to be conjunct Saturn, it's going to be conjunct Neptune, talk about confusing, but in the meantime, it will be in a square with the sun, and also the sun will be in a sextile to Chiron. So, with the moon in this degree of Pisces, it's one thing that we are being sustained in terms of our creativity and our expression with the sun in Gemini, to be like, you know what, everything is here. It's like a buffet table of ideas. I'm just going to pull everything that I want out, and I'm going to just, put whatever I want on my plate, and I have all these options from all these different locations, and the real issue is assimilating all of these things. Well, the square to the moon in our 3rd quarter moon, that's like a crisis in consciousness, is going to be kind of that nagging feeling that we have of like, the table is already set. Do we trust that that we will be led to sit down with the right people at the right time for the right reasons, right? And it reminds me, actually, of Psalm 23. There is a verse, and I think I've already talked about this. There's a verse in Psalm 23 where it says, "You've prepared a table for me in front of my enemies," right? You've anointed me with oil, my cup runs over. So, but it's about trusting that relationship. And the moon in Pisces, it can be very confusing. It's going to be conjunct Neptune, so it's not exactly going to be easy, but that 3rd quarter square is going to be very important for all of us to be cognizant and emotionally aware. Do I trust this process? Do I trust that at the right time with the right people, we're all going to sit down together? Or am I more focused on gathering as much of the immediate environment as I can? And the thing about trying to assimilate all of those various vectors, or in the case of a cafeteria, you slop all this food on your tray, and then you're trying to eat it, and then what happens? You either waste it, you can't digest it, it's too much, right? So just be... That 3rd quarter moon, I think, is going to be something that we actually really need in order to kind of slow our roll here and realize, where is our abundance actually coming from? And then, like I said, the sun will sextile Chiron. And so it may square the moon, but at the very least, there is an opportunity here to utilize some of that. It's like, we have all of this food heaped on our tray, and maybe we should just be aware of, like, you know what, I'm not going to eat all this, right? I'm not going to be able to process all of this. Maybe I can share it with people, or maybe I can find a way to share it with those who need it so that they can have their own sense of healing. Maybe they are not getting the sustenance that they need, and I don't need to keep putting it all on my plate necessarily. Maybe it needs to be shared, or maybe it needs to be disseminated. Oh, that's very interesting, because that was the waning gibbous, right? The disseminating moon leading up to this third quarter moon. So exciting times ahead, I'm sure. This does feel like an integration, as most full moon periods do, but this feels like a really, really important integration time. So take care of yourself. Give yourself the time and the space to really process information if you really need to, right? Because with Neptune, of course, like this, especially with Mercury in a sextile to Neptune, it's very easy to be led astray or to be delusional about what is leaving your life or what needs to leave your life. And you can kind of convince yourself of anything, right? And so be very mindful of that too, as the Mercury sextile Neptune. But on the whole, it requires us to participate. So if you have the intentions of that king of forces, right, I think it's going to be okay. But if you find yourself kind of deluding yourself and thinking that, assuming that what is in front of you is everything you need, and then you realize that it's a hologram, that can be very difficult as well. So I think I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm going to check in with the stream real quick, see if there's any questions, any comments. I just really appreciate you guys so very much. Thank you for being here. I couldn't be doing this without you. So it really does mean a lot to me. So regardless if you're catching this on the live stream or on the replay, thank you very much for being here. I do truly appreciate all of you very much. Don't forget the offerings that I have. You can link directly to them from the description box below. You don't have to fumble around and search on my website. Keep an eye out for things that are upcoming, of course. And, I'll see you guys next week for the Starseed Ministry. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other the very best you can. And have a good week, guys. God bless you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.